You heard a lot in the last panel session about logistics. You might remember that I talked about it as something that's really important to us, supply chains and logistics. I barely scratched the surface. We wanted to make sure you could hear from an expert. So our next speaker is absolutely an expert in that topic. I'm really delighted to welcome Dr. George Duchek from the Defense Logistics Agency, former DARPA program manager, to the stage. Welcome, George.
Hey, good afternoon. Albert Einstein said, "The world as we have created it is the process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." So I'd like to thank DARPA, Dr. Tompkins, for inviting me here to be part of this epic forward event. And from this morning's talk on circadian rhythms, I know that we're approaching the afternoon lull. So if you nod off, I won't take it personally. I understand it's not me, it's biology. So I've been fortunate to have a career in government service and the private sector that spanned the entire product life cycle. I've held executive positions in science and technology, the front end of the product life cycle, as an Air Force Research Lab Director, in research and development as the first director of Defense Innovation Unit in Mountain View, in acquisition as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Command, Control, Communications, Cyber, and Business Systems, and now at the end of the product life cycle in logistics and sustainment as the Chief Information and Innovation Officer at the Defense Logistics Agency. So each job gave me a different perspective to view the unique aspects of each stage of the product life cycle and the DoD acquisition ecosystem from cradle to grave. I've also had the greatest job you can have in government or anywhere. As Dr. Tompkins mentioned, I was a DARPA program manager with a portfolio of programs that spanned undersea to space, and it was the best job ever, bar none, period, mic drop. So briefly, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Defense Logistics Agency, we are the nation's combat logistics support agency, and we operate in more than 20 countries to meet our warfighters' needs on this planet and with the newly formed Space Force, maybe even off this planet. At DLA, we manage 8 major supply chains globally. Everything from the food and the fuel and the weapons parts in between. And we operate like a nonprofit company, but within the government. That is, we aggregate DoD needs across the services and use this huge buying power to drive down costs. We then pass those savings, those purchasing cost savings, onto our customers in our pricing. We generate roughly $43 billion a year in revenue, and it would make DLA the 75th company on the Fortune 100 if we were the private sector company. So on any single day, on the average, we deliver 1 million meals, 11 million gallons of fuel, 10,000 medical items, 15,000 pharmaceutical items, and 89,000 other orders, issuing 167,000 items. We manage 5 million line items with approximately $205 billion in active contracts. About 93% of our contracts and contract actions are automated, and we execute about 12,000 contract actions a day, or roughly over 4 million a year. Wow, there's a lot going on there. And fundamental to our operations is our information technology. So before any product shifts, information moves first. So today I'm going to cover a few points: supply chain and network challenges, DoD's approach to just-in-time versus just-in-case we go to war, product visibility challenges, and finally, some future options. So until recently, the mention of the topic of supply chain, logistics, sustainment, met with a collective yawn. They were taken as given. They operate in the background, and they were invisible to most of us. We didn't notice it because things just happened. They just worked. And we got what we needed, where we needed it, and when we needed it. Everything just worked with clock-like precision. Then suddenly it didn't. COVID massively perturbed this choreographed system. In Ernest Hemingway's 1926 novel, The Sun Also Rises, Mike is asked how he went bankrupt. 2 ways, gradually and then suddenly, he replied. I think the insight here is that humans rarely appreciate what's happening until it gets to an inflection point. This is how disruption occurs. The crisis will evolve over a much longer period of time than you perceive, but then happen much faster than you expect. So in March of 2020, everything began to not just work. The system was perturbed by an exogenous shock to both supply and demand. A dramatic increase in demand for certain products like personal protective equipment, medical supplies, toilet paper, wipes, foods, as well as a dramatic decrease in demand for things like fuel, travel, anything that was related to convention or 3D interactions. Supply was not and is still not matching demand in a rapidly changing and is rapidly changing the demand behaviors. So reverberations from supply and demand shocks, as well as government policies, resulted in labor shortages and reprioritization of everything from microchips to tires to baby formula. Our military and our commercial supply chains are inextricably intertwined. We, DoD, depend on the commercial sector for pretty much all that we build and consume. In a Schumpeterian sense, our innovations are putting together these available commercial inventions, components and products, in new and different ways to solve our warfighting challenges or problems. We do what Clayton Christensen called jobs to be done. Our global supply chain is really a global supply network. I think calling it a supply chain really gives the impression that it's an ordered linear system, and it's far from that. It's actually a complex web of interdependencies. And a hallmark of any complex system is emergent behavior. Behaviors that could not be a priori predicted ahead of time. Understanding and managing this complex mesh of interdependencies is relatively new. The phrase supply chain was first used less than 40 years ago. It was used after terms like procurement, logistics, and manufacturing, which are all elements of supply chain that need to be managed, but supply chain management, that field is relatively new. Nonetheless, we see that successful companies and successful nations are the ones that manage supply processes well. David Ricardo was a 19th century British classical economist, and he gave us this theory of competitive advantage. And quite simply, it says that nations should produce what they're good at producing, given their geography, their political system, their labor force, and then trade with other nations that do the same. It's really a specialization in the spirit of Adam Smith's pin factory, but for nations. The 200-year-old theory still undergirds our system of international trade, and it contributes to the fragility we've all been experiencing in our supply chains because, excuse me, grab some water. Because of all the dependencies that it creates. A necessary condition for this to work is the transportation network. And until mid-last century, supply chains were mostly local due to this lack of effective multimodal transportation options. With trucking, rail, air, and modern containerized shipping, all lowering the cost of goods moving around the globe, supply chains grew exponentially. And so did our dependencies. They grew exponentially. Containerized shipping probably had the greatest influence on globalization by dramatically driving down the cost of shipping over 10x and enabled companies to take full advantage of labor arbitrage using cheaper labor to manufacture goods in other countries. It set the stage for Asia to become the manufacturing powerhouse that it is today. And that tacit knowledge gained by these Asian manufacturers is hard to replicate in logistics. So the United States, over the past 75 or so years, has moved from a nation that made stuff to a nation that makes ideas. We've moved up the value chain from things to thoughts. Our free market innovation machine has been responsible for the greatest creation of wealth the globe has ever seen. Ideas born in the US are turned into products outside the US and sold and consumed here as well as everywhere else. We became even more dependent on a global network of transportation, goods, and services. The world became flat, as Thomas Friedman would say. But will it remain flat? Peter Zeihan, in his recent book called The End is Just the Beginning, predicts that globalization will shatter. So what does that mean to us? What does that mean to our supply chains and our networks? Will we, the DoD or the US, be able to reshore what we need? Can we find substitutes? Will we be able to do without? Remember, our commercial supply chains and our military supply chains are inextricably intertwined. Disruption in the private sector becomes disruption in our military supply chain. There is, however, one important difference. Commercial private sector supply chains were optimized to provide goods at precisely the right time and the right place, exactly where they were needed. There's an entire science of what's called just-in-time management, where items arrive exactly where and when they're needed, and there's no inventory, very lean. Maintaining inventory is an expense because every item on the shelf is really dollars sitting on that shelf, really cash sitting on that shelf that can't be used for other things to operate the firm. So commercial firms have collected data on the buying habits of corporations and individuals to see how they behave during times of disaster, how they behave during holidays, how they behave even weekly, diurnally, or seasonally. And knowing these purchasing habits, they are very, very accurate at predicting when and where goods will be needed and shipments arrive just in time to be consumed. It's taken about 4 decades to get this right. So the supply chain is very lean, and being very lean, it cannot absorb large variations in demand. The DoD operates similarly for items that have a predictable cadence of consumption. But additionally, the military has to be ready to go to war. Our operations tempo will increase, and products that we used in the stable peacetime environment will change. To absorb this change in demand, best guess inventory is needed. These are goods that are kept on the shelf just in case. This just in case inventory absorbs this shock in demand. So to be sure, DoD does a lot of wartime and scenario planning that helps figure out what the just-in-case stock levels should be. But Nassim Taleb's black swan lurks behind every one of those war plans. So the pandemic in 2020 introduced huge demand and supply chain shocks to our economy, and we still haven't recovered. Now imagine if we enter a large-scale war. Could our supply chains handle that change in events? If our internet was attacked, if our electrical grid was attacked, if our financial system was attacked, if overseas shipping was attacked or halted, then suddenly the factor inputs to our products would no longer be available. Needed goods would become unavailable. It would be a mission kill. The adversary wouldn't have to attack DoD at all. Again, our commercial and our military supply chains are inextricably intertwined. We rely on the private sector for all our supplies. Even for specialty parts, things that we make uniquely for ourselves, we still rely on raw materials that may not be available. And even if we were able to produce those needed military goods domestically, the need would be geographically far away. And if this is a serious risk, then to absorb this change in consumption, we would need to have massive investments in items that sit on the shelf that are stored locally near centers where conflict may arise just in case. So is it time to take a clean sheet approach to how we supply our military? If you agree that supply chains are in crisis, then we need to follow Einstein's advice and change our thinking. Or Do we just need more incremental improvement of what we're already doing? Since 2014, there has been a 76% annual growth rate in venture funding for logistics startups. Clearly, the private sector sees logistics as an area ripe for innovation. My R&D team has been exploring areas of collaboration for logistics innovation, bringing the technology, the tactics, and the concepts together to solve our military problems. You'll hear more of that in the panel discussion after the break. So today, regarding technology, overlapping advanced and emerging technologies are such as blockchain, Internet of Things, digital twins, digital threads, big data, AI, drones, are all driving innovation and efficiency in logistics. End-to-end visibility of the supply chain and transparency are more important than ever before in our risk calculus. Coupling these emerging technologies provides verified end-to-end visibility and enables a what-if supply chain simulation that can produce alternative courses of actions, COAs, that mitigate the risk of not getting the right product to our warfighter at the right time. To do this, though, data is foundational. Even more so, good data is critical. It enables the prediction and helps signal what supply network behaviors are normal and what are abnormal. Non-obvious relationships in our supply network may be uncovered by applying AI. And data only has intrinsic value when it's visible, accessible, understandable, linked, trustworthy, interoperable, and secure. Modernizing our warehouses in DLA and modernizing our software can help improve inventory management, and something DoD writ large is interested in improving, audit. So we know exactly what we have, where it's located, and know what we can issue our customers. But taking inventory is a labor-intensive, time-consuming process, so believe it or not, it's really only done annually at our warehouses. So our best guess is very perishable. It's out of date not long after we do the inventory. So we're investigating flying drones inside our warehouses to conduct inventories on a daily basis. So we'll know what we have on the shelf, and we'll also be able to produce auditable results. For many items, keeping them in a virtual inventory may be even a better solution. With digital twins of a needed part, advanced and additive manufacturing, either within the DoD sustainment ecosystem or the commercial sector, can produce parts on demand. Our CIBR program has funded the development of recycling technology that takes end-of-life electronic components and applies a plasma process and advanced materials engineering to recover pure additive metal powders. The People's Republic of China, and you heard in the panel discussion, accounts for about 80% of rare earth production and refining. 61% of the global lithium refining for batteries used in electric vehicles. 100% of the processing of natural graphite needed for batteries. 97% of the silicon, of the production of silicon used in solar arrays. And 80% of the global lithium battery recycling capacity. This is a heavy dependency on a nation that is not necessarily friendly to our best interests. More and more of our patterns, platforms, vehicles, and future capabilities will rely on lithium-ion batteries. And global demand for lithium-ion graphite, two of the most used materials inside the lithium-ion batteries, is expected to grow by 4,000 and 2,500% respectively over the next decade or so. So we at DLA, though, currently have no lithium recycling program. And recycling is not only good for national defense, but it's also good for the planet. Are there alternatives to lithium batteries? DLA manages the National Defense Stockpile. which stockpiles minerals needed to make everything from basic ammunition to night vision goggles to nuclear weapons. And there's a lack of transparency and an over-reliance on concentrated foreign sources that are critical, that use these critical rare earth elements that are key in the US supply chain for essential commercial and national security applications. I just read 2 days ago, I think, that DARPA now has a challenge program to address this problem. So thank you. So chaos is seemingly the new normal. We'll never recover to where we were, in my opinion, in 2019. We need to respond and execute and operate our supply chains in a VUCA, a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. Logistics is becoming much more of a common theme in our weapons and software development. Joint All-Domain Command and Control talks about the C2 of logistics. OSD's Advana program wants to have a logistics common operational picture. And war games are won and lost on logistics capabilities. Current logistics concepts clearly can be improved. We need to rethink military logistics. So coming full circle to where I started roughly 20 minutes ago, our DoD supply chain, as we have created it, is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. I'd like to close with a quote from General Omar Bradley. And he said, "Amateurs worry about tactics. Professionals worry about logistics." Thank you.